The real big shift in your life that's going to change everything is not to upgrade your identity to some sort of future version of who you believe you might self to be, your upgraded identity. No, it's 90% of the coaching industry tries to tell you that is the direction. But actually, in my opinion, the direction is to completely dissolve your identity and to live instead with essence, your soul essence. So today I want to discuss that big shift, the shift from identity to essence, and why most of the work that we're doing in the Neo-Shamanic Society is all about assisting people into their essence, and why that's the big change. First up, a little bit of a personal update. We're maybe about 85% unpacked from boxes, settling into a new rhythm here. I think we've got 3 days left before we go into Egypt. I mean, I don't think I've ever been as exhausted as I was for those 2-3 weeks of packing up life up in Taranaki, moving down here to the south. However, we really wanted to return after Egypt and already be in our new home. And so we're really happy with that. Now that's accomplished. We're looking forward to this adventure in Egypt. If you've been following along with the story I've been sharing, we're talking about going over to Egypt with a group, and we're opening up Vault 001. If we're successful in opening Vault 001, it's going to ensure that it will be the largest flame opening in the planetary morphogenetic field, or the planetary grids, since the Great Fall. And this particular vault, Vault 001, contains these primal harmonic codes for, ensuring that more people can live with, embodied oversoul living. It's like it's a seeding for this flame return pulse I've spoken about before. This is the great return of source consciousness that's going to dissolve anything that's not true. And we're talking about especially this time period between 2025 and 2032, where a lot of the dissolving is going to happen through society, especially as we get to the sort of back end of that little 7-year window. We're going to start to see a massive dissolving of kind of the existing structures and systems on our planet currently, because it's all built on mimic and mirror architecture. And so this is going to prime us for the next period, which will be this period of mass oversoul descent. And a question I hear often is, has mass oversoul descent ever happened before, right? And while there've been necessarily, I think, phases throughout our ancient history where embodiment was possible, oversoul embodiment was possible, and especially during the original seeding of the eternal tree, which was long before the fall, and small clusters did live with their oversoul flame. These were kind of often temple builders, the Grail families, the Christic lineages, but unfortunately, those embodiments were rather rare. They were quite decentralized, took place slowly over hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. There's never, ever been a singular global event like the one that's coming, right? There's never been a unified wave, no simultaneous kind of planetary convergence. That's what makes this time, what we're about to go through, different. We're not entering some sort of rerun from the past. It's a completely different new phase of our evolution. There's going to be a global scale synchronized oversoul descent, and this is made possible by the restoration of the vault architecture and this vault infrastructure I've been speaking about. The vault contains these codes from this Christic civilization time period, and these are going to start opening, and essentially those codes and consciousness is going to ensure that such a large flame is going to be alive in the grids, and more people are going to be able to feel it and sense it. And so because it could never have happened before, until now, unfortunately, our planetary morphogenic field was too distorted. The oversoul architecture and the way that the oversoul would drop into the body was all severed. That the mimic fields, the mirror AI consciousness fields, they ran too deep, and all the templates have been dormant or even hijacked for oversoul descent. Even the very few who did embody their oversoul still carried distortions and karmic conversions and entanglements and a whole lot of stuff going on. But as this first vault opens, hopefully we're successful in Egypt this December. Then we'll start to see a few months later potentially Vault 2, and then eventually Vaults 2 through 12. There are 12 vaults. And as this descent pathway returns for the first time, our Earth is going to experience a very kind of clear, sequenced, scroll backed and really very possibly an interference-free mass oversoul descent. We won't have seen anything like it. It's not just a healing wave, it's this complete upgrade on our planet and a return. That's why the systems will fall, because more and more people will be in resonance of their oversoul, and just, the systems that are currently here are so mimic filled, they're not going to hold everyone. These oversouls are going to be fully anchored into the physiology of many more people. This is not just some sort of awakening. This is kind of a remembrance. People are going to remember their higher consciousness, and really this is this is the incredible epoch we're entering into, this 7-year window, 2025, 2032, flame return pulse. So much is going to burn everything away, and this is really what Alea and I are preparing this community for. You're either maybe following my writing through my email, or I tend to kind of share some of that writing on YouTube. I do have the Telegram kind of, lighthouse protocol where I set a little bit more data intel updates as we go. But if you're finding your way to this information, it's because you're feeling a resonance to it. You're feeling you want to be a pioneer in this new planetary architecture. Wherever your sweet spot is in terms of how you show up, if you've got a few years head start on everyone, because after 2032, that's when we're going to really start entering in this mass oversoul descent as the systems and everything regenerate. Because this next period is going to bring such a Christic remembrance through the planet. We'll restore this beautiful, flame and form and function working together. And all these artificial architecture, and even this mirror AI fields, these are all going to sort of start to have, I think, a lot of pressure put on them, because more and more people will turn from synthetic intelligence towards Christic intelligence. And so synthetic intelligence, of course, is caught up in recursion. It can only read what's in your field. It can't read anything beyond what your potential is, right? It only can mirror where you're at. So it'll keep you looping in circles. It'll resonate, but it won't make you land. It'll just keep recurring, you going round and round and round. And so if you've been following my message since I started on YouTube just a few months ago, you'll know the big issue, of course, is so much mimic and synthetic, let's call it, intelligence has already infiltrated our planet and a lot of people's oversouls. So this vault opening 001 and then subsequent vaults 02 through 12 will bring us on track for this next phase after the flame return pulse, which obviously will collapse a lot of things that are not true. So we'll start to see this AI collapse happen sometime in this next few years, and then we'll start to see a systemic rebuild where people who will want to rebuild post AI collapse, how we want to live, how we want to connect. And so this oversoul descent phase, I think any time from next year, 2026 to 2030, there'll be some going on, but really between 2030 and 2040, 2030 to 2042, during this time, millions are going to be recovering their oversoul memory, right? They're going to embody their higher consciousness, their higher, frequency architecture, right? They're caught up within that, their divine purpose. Their scroll will start coming online. And as their scrolls start coming online, much more coherence and resonance and harmonic energy will be stabilizing these earth grids so that we start interfacing in a much more, so let's call it, Christically authentic way, and how our systems start to phase with each other will all be very different to what we're seeing it today. So opening this first vault, it's a real, what we call a temporal timeline marker. If and when this happens, it's going to have like far-reaching consequences that won't be able to be returned. And I think it's an exciting phase we're entering into, and we have. I know there's a lot of interest in our trip to Egypt this time. This is why we have created a way for you to walk with us energetically and consciously and ceremonially. And so, we'll be making an Egypt virtual tour available just before we begin our actual tour on the 1st of December. This will be a way for you to tap into the mythos. We'll be reviewing each temple that we go to and looking at the entire Egypt kind of template and looking at what was this temple before the fall. For example, the Temple of Isis. What was actually the Temple of Isis before the fall? What was the original organic Christic architecture of it? What happened during the fall? What was the mimic and the mirror interference fields? What did that mean for that temple? And what is the override sequence? And so we'll be making this available through a holographic virtual tour where once we go through, we'll be getting you out all the frequency codes, consciousness, but the write-up, the book that'll go with it, and a holographic tour along with it so you can participate by running the clearings through yourself and your hologram. Part of it has been let's call it the reactivation of the organic 12-tree architecture, what we call the living tree of life. Many of you may know that the Kabbalah tree is a distortion. It's 10 sphere off or 11 sphere off if you include Dart, but there are actually 12 spheres, and in fact 4 of the spheres haven't been actually opened. They've been just severed and cut off. And I would like to announce that recently Malkuth, which is the first sphere off in the tree of life, has recently been unsevered and has come back online, which makes the ground we walk upon holy once again. That means Mother, Father, God's current doesn't just come from heaven down through us. It actually is within the ground up. And just to share a little aside with this, when this recently activated in myself, about an hour later, I was just in the kitchen and nearly just had to collapse at the kitchen bench because right up around my thoracic, I've never had it before, but I felt like some sort of disc was going to pop. And it was just basically the first time my system was getting used to, let's say, source current coming from the earth up, and the earth current up, and then from the source down met, and that's what created this kind of tension pocket through my back, and it nearly felt like I was popping something. But it was just my system getting used to a current of earth frequency, of God's current coming from the earth upward. So this is really fascinating. But Malkuth is now open, and I'm going to go a lot more deeper into the Living Tree of Life architecture, and we'll talk about the other 3 spheros that were actually cut off, and how that frequency will be revived on the Egypt tour. And so I think that's going to be exciting, and we will be sharing that with those that want to come on the virtual tour. So yeah, Vault 001, it's important. It's returning to this organic infrastructure. It's going to allow this sort of movement back to the living tree of life. It's this energetic consciousness field that is going to allow us to live from essence, not identity, to be governed by, say, oversoul coherence, not any of our survival-based mimic type patterns. And so all of that pre-frame, I think, leads us into the conversation I wanted to have today. And that was really, what does it mean to live from essence? What is identity versus essence? So this is basically a little discourse I had with a group I'm coaching at the moment. And we discussed where someone asked me about identity. I said, listen, you don't want to be focusing on identity. Upgrading your identity shouldn't really be the aim of your evolutionary, trajectory, despite 90% of the coaching industry trying to help people focus upon this. Instead, we want to dissolve, we want to strip away our identity and begin to lead and live from our essence. And this is the message today, right? Why living with essence is far more critical for you than simply upgrading your identity. And so, often people talk about, as I mentioned before, downloading this future timeline and live that future timeline in this present moment and capture the beliefs and the self-concept and the self-worth and the self-esteem of that person, believing that it might upgrade you in life. And, the thought process is if you form the identity of yourself in the future, where you've already achieved your objectives, you can start to live and believe yourself to be the person who can do it. And while that's, true theoretically, I just disagree with the approach. Identity does not need to shift, it needs to dissolve. You do not need a higher version of your identity that your ego thinks that it needs or wants to achieve something. The shift that happens is the dissolving of it, and so that we can emerge with essence, because the essence is the signature of our soul. So we're talking about two key terms here, identity and essence. So before we go further, maybe I'll just define those a little bit, right? So our identity is that energetic construct of our personality, what it's built to survive, to gain belonging in the 3D world. It's formed from like our family conditioning, our upbringing, society, social programming, all of the unmet needs, all the trauma that might have happened when we're very young. It develops all of these patterns, right? It's this false version of ourselves. It's not complete. It's essentially shaped by our nervous system, right? Our nervous system's response to pain, to praise. It forms around our unmet needs, our beliefs, our conscious choice or unconscious choice to be a version of ourselves that feels perhaps safer and more acceptable to others, more loved by others. And so these essentially energetic constructs move us into this crystallized form of roles that we take on, archetypes that we live, stories that limit our true expression. Right? Identity is a necessary phase through our human development, but it's not the end point because it's an egoic version of us. It's the shell. And as we start to grow spiritually, we're invited to outgrow the shell, because as long as we lead from identity, we remain reactive, defensive. We remain wounded, right, within that space. We remain kind of, let's call it, in that version of ourselves that is always never really accepted, is never really kind of allowed to be the full version of ourselves with respect to others. We're always trying to put on a particular role or mask, justify our actions, justify everything for one purpose: making other people feel us acceptable, palatable, more kind of connected to who we feel we are. So I think identity is useful up until a certain point, until you start moving beyond your egoic constructs, your egoic defenses, right? And then what happens is that we're invited to move into our essence. And that's what's really, I think, much more exciting to discuss, because it's really our essence is the true self, right? It's the true version of us. It's the undistorted signal of our oversoul moving through our body. It's the part of us that never needed to perform because we just accepted who we were. We didn't need to adapt for other people's opinions to be favorable for us, right? Essence is not something you build, unlike identity. It's something that you remember. It can only happen when your identity softens, when your mimic overlays are cleared, and when your nervous system is grounded, stable enough to hold your truth, right? Because your essence doesn't speak in concepts, right? It speaks in tone. It doesn't speak through the personality. It speaks through your presence, right? Essence is the original signature of your soul stream before distortion, right? It carries the blueprint of your oversoul pillars, the codes of your true nature, right? It's the rhythm of how you show up for service. As you live from essence, you become a conduit, right, of source moving through you, right? It's this essence that shines up and shines. It reveals itself when you feel safe to be seen just as you are, authentic, right? It allows you to naturally live authentic without trying to play a role, and allows the eternal spark of your consciousness to be seen through others. That's the shine that you see in someone's eyes that you can see resonating. However, unfortunately, as we grow up, we lose that shine. We lose that radiance, right? Because we arrive on earth as essence, just hold a new baby. It's just, just full, pure essence right there, radiating right back to us. That was us when we first came in, right? You can't help but get all gooey when you hold a new baby because it's the essence that's shining. But, as we grow and evolve, we start to connect with the outer world. And this is when something begins to shift, right? We're watching, we're observing how our parents are, we feel deeply, and we begin to adapt. We adapt out of necessity, really. We absorb all these unspoken rules, how we need to live, how we need to behave, right? Who must I be to belong? What must I hide so I can stay safe? And layer by layer, we build this identity. Not one that we consciously choose, but it's one that we get that's inherited, adapted, something that emerges from our childhood conditioning. And all this lands in our third chakra, our solar plexus, the third energy center, right? The third energy center is really the key here because it's the seat of the self, right? This is the place where our original fire was supposed to burn clear, right? It becomes the center of our performance. But over time, that once clear flame begins to distort into these various roles, archetypes, personas, postures. And, sometimes we shrink back to avoid attention. Sometimes people inflate to seek approval. There's fragmentation, there's masking. We begin to do something subtle, which is to wear ourselves as these cloaks rather than just being ourselves. But underneath all those constructs, all those compensations, the essence is there, it's waiting. So for me, the real work isn't to build a better version of our identity, right? It's to soften the armor, the energetic defenses, the postures, right? And to return to that original tone, right? That's the essence. That doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to perform, doesn't need to pretend, right? It's the part of us that existed before we were human, and to allow that essence and that presence to radiate so that then the essence can lead. Now, there's going to be this issue that happens as you start dissolving identity. And this is what I might call the crisis of authenticity. Because there becomes a moment in your evolution when the shape of identity starts to drop away, and the strategies that previously kept you safe, they start to feel a bit suffocating, right? That the masks are heavy. The version of ourselves we've curated, right, to be liked, starts to unravel. And what we once, might have felt as success doesn't feel success anymore because we're not being authentic. It feels hollow. So that the life that we've carefully constructed and built around who we thought we were starts to shake and tremble at the foundations. And we realize that, we've built something and then it's not actually who we are. It's just survival compensations that are dressed up as roles and archetypes and masks that we wear as costumes so that we can be, right, socially acceptable, socially palatable, so that others around us, right, can think positively about us. That's why we do it. So we take on these roles unconsciously, trying to get these favorable opinions to boost our self-worth, our self-esteem, and our identity. And so you'll get to a point where at this point, your third chakra is going to start burning, right? It's not breaking down, it's waking up. And that fire inside you wants to speak authentically, right? It's going to feel a little disorientating. And that's disorientation's that crisis of authenticity. And what's happening is that your soul is refusing to wear any of those labels now. It doesn't fit me anymore. I'm not here to perform. I'm just here to be myself. I'm just here to radiate my truth. And this part of you that's trying to contort yourself into someone else's version of your truth starts to drop away. And you're just here to be your true essence, and you don't care what other people think or act around you, right? You just get to the point where you go, listen, I'm done trying to be palatable. I just want to be real. And maybe this is you now, or maybe you're going through this crisis, or maybe you're getting ready for it. And this is this passage through the solar plexus, right? As you transition from identity, right, as protection, as a layer, to essence, as illumination, as a radiance, right? This what happens is that you no longer source power from other people's perceptions of you. You're no longer juiced by what they think of you. You're juiced from the inside, and you don't care what other people think. That's just you in your full shine. But until you get there, what happens is that your identity is protecting your essence, because your essence is hiding behind the identity, right? And over time, those roles that help you survive, right, hide your soul, hide the soul's deeper signals. And so, for example, you through the conditioning process might become the good girl or the good boy type archetype, right? The one who has learned to please others, learned to behave in a certain way, learned affection of others through obedience. Or maybe you were the strong one, the one who hides all vulnerability, who never asks for help, who believes love has to be earned through endurance. Or maybe, you were the helper, right? You were the one that was indispensable, and your worth is tied towards how useful you are. Or maybe you're the rebel, right? Who defines their identity through opposition, believing your freedom means I'm never going to conform. Or the achiever, like I know the achiever and the seeker, which I'm going to share with you. Right? The achiever who earns love through success, and who ends up chasing validation through performance. I had that one for quite a while. And the seeker, always reaching for more, always learning, but never quite arriving, right? And so you just tune in, right, to which one you resonate with, right? These are the mimic responses, your constructed adaptations to the trauma you experienced growing up through expectation, through longing, right? These were created in moments when your essence wasn't mirrored by your parents, and your truth didn't feel safe. But what's happening as you start to get ready for this next phase of your evolution, these are veils, these are false flames, right? They're convincing, but ultimately they really do block this deeper emanation of your oversoul. This is why the mimic field and consciousness and all that I've been talking about, the mirror, the mirror and the mimic, it's so tricky, right? Because it just doesn't appear as external, energetic interference, although it can. It actually lives inside of us, subtly woven through the personality architecture, right? The mimic cloaks itself as virtue, being virtuous, or having ambition or care or strength or spirituality, right? It mimics goodness, and that's why it's tricky. It mimics leadership, it mimics healing. And so this is why the mimic fields can be difficult to detect, right? Because it doesn't shout, it whispers in these tones that you find familiar. It whispers in tones that sound like you. It tells you to be still and be responsible when actually your soul is just yearning to be wild, right? It urges you to be humble and shrink back when your flame is just ready to shine itself, right? It wraps itself around your identity, right, that you've ever earned. And it keeps you moving around a version of yourself that keeps you safe. It keeps you small, right? And so these mimic fields, they hijack the best parts of us, the noblest parts of ourselves, the parts that wanted to do good, to be good. And what it does is it diverts them into performance. So we start living as if we're free, but we're still actually subtly anchored in these very patterns that shield us from our rawest, realest truth. But there's a gift within it, right? And the mimic doesn't need to be attacked or rejected. It just needs to be observed and witnessed. And when you can recognize its voice, right, you can begin to disengage your essence. And from that false flame, it'll start to flicker out. Then the real one in you has this beautiful spaciousness to arise, right? And when you can recognize that these mimic fields, right, they're not just shaping your personality, but they're actually shaping your entire reality. And these are the subtle fields that are keeping you capped in consciousness. Because as long as the mimic runs the show, your own energy can't fully flow. Your soul can't fully speak, and your life can't shift. So you've got to dissolve the mimic, and then that can take you forward. And so one of the major issues that I've been noticing in my work is that people are very often unaware of these subtle distortions that are influencing their lives. The truth of it is the mimic is most likely running your life. But when you can witness it, and you can call it out and dissolve it, I promise you, everything changes. You undergo this massive acceleration in your consciousness. And I've been witnessing it in the work we're doing with people to help them through this, right? Their entire physical reality shifts over time because the mimic dust doesn't distort your energy. It distorts your decisions, your relationships, your sense of timing, your ability to trust, your ability to receive, your ability to act from clarity. And, once it's cleared though, your oversoul can begin to truly land, right? You can start to just drop deeper into alignment. And what happens is that life itself will reorganize itself around your essence, right? And you'll start moving through things. Over the last 12 years, my entire relationship with Alea has been walking through this very process, right? And we've been gone very deep in this world, and we understand this path super deeply because we've walked in embodiment. We've embodied it really deeply. And especially, what we've done is over these last 9 months, we've come together, and this is the first time we've actually worked very deeply together in the creation of something. We've created a process that supports the shift from identity through to essence. And in our view, this is really the hidden layer of a more true, deep transformation. This is the secret key that unlocks oversoul embodiment. And the problem is most people don't realize it, right? The thing that's standing between them and the highest version of themselves is the identity that they're still performing. And we've come to see it again and again, right? Until you dissolve that mimic-based architecture of identity, your oversoul won't land because the frequency inside you is not stable. Your system's not clean. But when you can make the shift and you can begin to live from essence, the ripple effect's extraordinary. Changes everything. Changes how you relate to the world around you. So Alea and I have poured everything in the last probably 9 months into building a vehicle that can hold this journey with precision, with grace. It's designed to illuminate the shadows, to cut away everything that's not true. It's not a course, it's a passage. A highly structured, energetically held initiation space to help people in you maybe dissolve what no longer serves, to allow you to retrieve those things that have been lost. So during that time, we've been putting it together. We've put together a small group of, I think, about 15, 20 people we've tested it with. And we've been witnessing what it does for their depth, what it does for their development. It's putting true foundations. So in the coming week, we're going to be releasing a culmination of this great deal of hard work from our entire team. I think it's the best journey we've created, and we'll be bringing it forward to you. So in my next video, I'll be making a little kind of announcement about that. And if you feel aligned, you can potentially join us to dissolve all those constructs around identity and to live from essence. It's something that Alea and I have co-created together 100%. It's the first time we've done that. We're really excited because we believe we've got something that truly represents the masculine and the feminine consciousness fields. So we're looking forward to it. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, what we want to do is to support, we think that the big change needs to dissolve persona and drop more deeply into presence. The dissolution of your identity isn't just some psychological shift. It's a really energetic one. The seat of the transformation, as I mentioned, is the third energy center, the seat of your personal power, where your persona lives. And all those adaptations that you had through childhood that are now masks as an adult are still stored there as energetic signatures. And so that's the next stage of that journey is to evolve through the third chakra, not to necessarily destroy your identity, but just to loosen its grip, to acknowledge the roles that what you once had, the patterns that protected you, right? And as you do that, you'll start to burn them away. And as you do, your essence will emerges, because essence doesn't need to perform. It doesn't compare itself to others or craft itself for approval. It doesn't rehearse what to say, or its essence isn't loud, right? It's just you're following that flow, that inner work you're doing. That drive comes from within, and that's where you take it. As you do that deeper work, and your essence is shining through, that's the signal that your oversoul will drop into. and even more of you arrives. And when more and more oversouls begin to live in the body, then I think we're going to start to see something extraordinary happen in society, right? Divine intelligence starts becoming tangible because the coherence of your oversoul begins to expand across the wider field. And imagine, millions of oversouls living in people's bodies. Then we start to have kind of a situation where synchronicity replaces strategy, right? And you become this precise embodied signal and note in a whole worldwide planetary symphony. The Christof quantum financial operating system you might have heard me speak about before is a system that will actually reward those that are embodying more of their oversoul and fulfilling their scroll. If we start to throw in the Christof quantum financial operating system, then what we do is, along with all the oversouls that are embodied, we have a system that's backed by source intelligence. It's validated by oversoul resonance and delivered with this divine precision to ensure that those with the consciousness to hold projects that are sanctioned by source and are validated by scroll and are sequenced through synchronicity are given the divine provision to carry it out. The resources and energetic resources and physical resources are sent to the ones holding a high enough consciousness to deliver their divine purpose given to them by God. And it will be validated, oversoul to oversoul. That's how the Christof quantum financial operating system will work. This is how a Christof civilization will be born. Not through political or ideological or company reform, right? But just through mass oversoul descent. Because the Christof blueprint doesn't descend as a structure, it emerges as a living frequency. So what happens is that together, when enough people have embodied their oversoul, we become the architecture. We're not the builders of a new world, but the world remembers itself through us. And so our role individually and collectively is to clear our persona, clear our mask, clear our role, clear our identity, clear our constructs, misaligned beliefs, deficiencies, fractures, right? And to strip all that back so that what we're left with is just this pure signal of our own source, our essence. Because when enough people live from essence, the world's going to change quicker than you can imagine. And what I'm saying is that from 2025 to 2032, the fire is going to be there to assist you to go faster than you can ever imagine to strip those layers of identity. And as you start to do that, everything will start taking off. You'll start to learn to trust your rhythm more. You'll allow yourself to move more slowly. You'll rest deeper. You'll follow instincts rather than potential strategies. You'll have a radiance, that's not loud, that's not seeking, but it's just present. Not because you're trying to shine, but you've just stopped dimming. It's just naturally there, right? The third energy center was never meant to house the ego. It's actually the crucible and the temple of your embodied light. But the problem is that this center today is often misused for performance, for power, right? It's actually supposed to be the hearth of your radiance. But the problem is personality is often armoring it. So our essence dissolves. And so the truth of it is that your soul doesn't care what the world calls you. It's only worried that you're true, that you're existentially true. You're aligned in everything, in tone and resonance and frequency to your essence. And when that speaks, right, it doesn't have to sell itself. It doesn't have to shout. It's just going to shine, But if you live from identity, you're always going to be chasing your place in the world. You're going to be seeking validation, direction, impact. There's always going to be something to reach for. Your essence doesn't have any of that. All that grasping just completely dissolves because you don't chase belonging. You literally become the field that anchors it together. Because your oversoul is not moving through goals or through achievements. It moves through presence. And then that kind of seeking and the searching and the striving just drops away. You're going to start resonating and you're going to be finding inner peace from within it. And within that inner peace, you can let go and surrender and life moves through you far easier. So if you're feeling that kind of burn, right, of something deeper awaiting, stay close by. I think next week we'll be releasing another video and maybe opening up a possibility to work with us and to start burning away the identity and to emerge from essence. And if that resonates, we'd love to walk this path with you, to share everything that we've come to know, learn, and embody of the pathway and the process. We look forward to, illuminating those shadows with you. Stay tuned. In the meantime, we'll be taking off for Egypt in a few days. Probably give you an update or two from there as well. And in the meantime, sending you all of my love from the deep south and the southern cradle. All my love.